What's new?
I'm Zeb Elif, Associate Professor of Jewish History at Touro College and Hebrew Theological College, and today I'm joined by a personal mentor, really mentor to the field, Professor Jenna Weissman Joselit. She is the Charles E. Smith Professor of Judaic Studies and Professor of History at George Washington University. Her most recent book, and the material for our discussion today, is Set in Stone, America's Embrace of the Ten Commandments. It was published by Oxford University Press just a few years ago. It's a wonderful book. And in discussion of early 20th century acculturation and religious life, very often we talk about Jews as a subject of how did Jews acculturate to American norms, if we can call it that at all. But what your Ten Commandments book teaches us is that in some cases, Jews were looked at as an interpreter of an object or a text that was symbolic of a touchstone, no pun intended, of American religious life.
Yeah, that's what makes the story of the Ten Commandments so compelling, because in its own way, it is the story of acculturation, not so much of a people, but of a text that then goes on to accumulate so many different lives, like a rolling stone. So it is a text, and it is an object, and it is something that people wear around their necks or on their wrists, and it lends itself to so many different interpretations. It's in stained glass, and it's in stone, and it's in paper. The fascinating thing, the most compelling thing I think about the Ten Commandments is that it's the most richly described and imagined of all religious symbols in America. There's really nothing that holds a candle to it, given the sheer plethora of iterations that the Ten Commandments gives rise to. I mean, how many religious symbols become the stuff of not one, but two major blockbuster movies, So that's what I find so compelling about it. And as far as the Jews are concerned, its trajectory in the US both supersedes the Jews and also acknowledges their role in the kind of national history that the Ten Commandments conveys to the US, because that's what's so fascinating about the Ten Commandments. They are deployed by Americans, Christian America, as a foundational document, and one that kind of gives weight and heft to the rule of law, to the American dream, to a blueprint of the good life. And it's in that kind of tension between, well, who was the Ten Commandments originally given to covenantally, and the way it then becomes a covenant between America and the divine presence. I'm babbling on here, and that's because there's so much to unpack when it comes to the Ten Commandments. And little did I know that when I started this project, which is why this project took forever to be midwife.
So is it just that it's intuitive, that it's a listing of...
I think, yeah, it's a listing. I mean, as I say, it's the ultimate to-do list, and it's neat and handy-dandy, but it also is a very effective package because it's both a contract and a blueprint. It's a promise. It contains so many elements. It seems to be timeless when we these days know it was a very contingent and historically situated artifact of its time, but no matter, it's managed to transcend its time and to become, I guess you could call it a living document. I don't know if that gets to it, but that certainly speaks to some of its power.
And so it's used by religious leaders, quite obviously. It's used as a symbol of the legal system, of the courts.
Right.
And it's used, as you point out, Hollywood. Why is it that the Ten Commandments can find it could be anchored into so many different spheres?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. What is it about this legal construct that grows out of the climate of the ancient Near East that lends itself to all manner of iterations, from how to drive a car, how to put on makeup, how to fight the good civil rights fight, how to grow tomatoes, how to play piano? What is it about this text that lends itself to so many different applications? And I would say it's in part the handy-dandiness. It's only 10. They're all very succinct for the most part. that it seems to be a formula. You know, that's it. It's a kind of formula for how to do right in the world. It's hard to pinpoint one dimension or another, but I think that the combination, the package, and the fact that it bears with it a kind of holy imprimatur. It's not anybody's Ten Commandments.
It is the to-do list of multiple faiths. And how are Jews?
But not just, can I just jump in here? It's
Please.
not just faith-based, and that's what makes it so fascinating, because it blurs the line between religion and culture. It underscores the porousness, particularly in the American context, of the nexus between religion and culture, and that it lends itself both to very sacerdotal, sacred applications, something transcendent, and it lends itself to the most quotidian of activities. So that says something about the pliability of this particular text and the ways in which Americans are so receptive to whatever is contained implicitly in those 10 do's or don'ts.
And how are Jews, this is my point well taken, how are Jews summoned as interpreters or stakeholders in, we'll focus specifically on the 20th century?
But, sometimes they are, and sometimes the fact that they are the folks to whom the Ten Commandments was initially given tends to get lost in the shuffle. So that at least for, I would say, much of American history, particularly in the wake of the Civil War and going forward, I would suspect that if you did a man on the street, person on the street interview, many folks would be surprised to learn that this was something that was given over to the ancient Israelites. They act as if they were the ones who had been present at Sinai, not the ancient Israelites. The only time that they really come into play as people with a direct and unmediated connection is when, oddly enough, claims of some kind of ancient version of the Ten Commandments are found buried within the soil in America. And they come with all sorts of arcane script. And so it's the Jews, the local rabbis, or those associated with scholarly aspects of Jewish history that are called on to interpret. There's this wonderful quote where one guy says, I know my olives, but this ain't like any olives I've ever seen. So it's really in the capacity of kind of linguistic authorities more than cultural authorities that the Jews are called on. The question is, how then do the Jews see the Ten Commandments in an American context? And for me, the way I saw them see it was as an exercise in neighborliness. It's one of the few texts that are commonly shared by Christians and Jews. And I think for our forebears, the idea that America placed so much trust in and emphasis on the Ten Commandments was a way to extol commonality and common bonds. It allowed the Jews to feel that they were giving America a kind of gift, a foundational gift, and that then included them in the national narrative. They didn't stand on the margins of or outside the precincts of that national narrative of America as the promised land. It was the text that was originally given to them that forged the new understanding of America as the promised land. So I imagine it was kind of a heady business, a way to secure their sense of allegiance to America, to feel comfortable in America. Those who were very sensitive might have wondered what happened to the direct Jewish connection to it, but those who were more excited by the possibility of belonging to the larger community were probably very enamored of the fact that it became an American phenomenon. I actually would say that the Ten Commandments becomes nationalized in this country. No other country, not even Israel, makes as much of the Ten Commandments as the US did and continues to do. It's like not for nothing that there are all these monuments throughout the US, 6-foot tall monuments that contain in English, no less, the text of the Ten Commandments. And recently, there was a disgruntled American citizen who plowed his car through one such monument in Arkansas, and it didn't take much time at all before people rallied to the well-being of this now demolished, depedestalized Ten Commandments and raised a ton of money to erect it again. So it brings to mind the two sets of luchot, except in a very different American context. And the people who superintended this effort call themselves the American History and Heritage Organization. And so clearly laying claim to the Ten Commandments, both physically and existentially, as something that's part and parcel of America's heritage, whatever that is quite the fascinating story, I think.
And for so much of this story to take place before the 1950s, where we have Tri-Faith America, and Will Herberg convinces everybody that Jews represent a third of the population,
right.
Protestant Catholic Jew. It's these types of symbols which Jews gravitate toward as agency for their place in American culture.
Well, it literalizes their place in America. I don't know that many Jews were so thrilled about seeing these Ten Commandments monuments, because it did mess with the idea of the separation of church and state. Many of these monuments were on public property, on civic grounds rather than private. So I know that the American Jewish Congress was quite vigilant in trying to make sure that the organization that sponsored them, the Fraternal Order of Eagles, was aware of the high stakes, and sometimes it even went to court. It lost to argue against them. But I think that when it comes more to the realm of ideas than the realm of materiality, the notion that the Ten Commandments were at once part of the Jews' patrimony and an American cultural heritage was comforting. And I would say, to build on that point, it's not for nothing that in the 1950s, when the idea of cultural oneness becomes an aspirational ideal, that so many suburban synagogues plant an oversized, extravagantly scaled Ten Commandments on the outside of their buildings to herald this sense of a common symbol, not something that's so odd and distinctive to the Jews, but one that was widely recognized, and not only widely recognized, but revered as something that Christians and Jews held in common. So it's the all-purpose symbol, this Ten Commandments. And I think for your purposes and for the purposes of a class discussion about acculturation, we often think about people as being the stuff of acculturation. And here we have a symbol that lends itself to acculturation and Americanization in ways that continue to haunt our imagination even today.
Thanks for clicking and learning. And here are some links to related videos. And subscribe. Don't miss out to making meaning of the past in the present for the future.